Okay, what can you make of the news and information and maybe some conspiracies surrounding Carvana, the stock price, the financial disclosures, and even the title problems that are being investigated in multiple states by government agencies, attorneys general, even law enforcement? The possibilities and the hypothetical reasons for these title problems may be related to the finances of the company. So we're going to talk about possible hypotheticals. We have no knowledge of any of this. We're not saying this is true, but we're just describing one way that a dealer, a licensed automotive dealer, can get into trouble with titles. As a matter of fact, this is the most common reason that dealers get into title problems. And a lot of it has to do with fraud and floor plan out of trust situations and double financing of vehicles. Again, we're not saying that this is what's happening at Carvana. We're not accusing them of anything. We're not stating that this is fact. We're saying here is one scenario of how a dealership, and that's what Carvana is. They're a car dealership. Their business model appears slightly different on the outside. It's in terms of an online seller, but deep down inside, they're just an ordinary car dealer. And they have inventory. So the way that dealerships obtain vehicles that do not have a new car franchise, because Carvana doesn't sell new cars, they only sell used cars, is they purchase vehicles from auto auctions and from consumers. Only way they can get cars. And there are two major auto auction chains in the country. One is Odessa, one is Mannheim. And those two auto auction chains have multiple locations, and Carvana will buy cars in large volumes from these chains. They may buy 100 cars a day, 200 cars a day from these auctions. And when a dealership purchases a vehicle from an auction, the auction offers them a line of credit. You don't have to pay for the vehicle the same day you buy it. Most auto auctions give you a credit line for your purchases. So you buy a truckload of cars. Let's say there's 10 $30,000 cars. That's $300,000 worth of inventory. You sign a promissory note for those vehicles, and you drive off with your cars. Now, the auction is going to hold the titles for those cars. They're going to use that as collateral. Now, when you sell one, and you need that title to give to a customer, you notify the auction, I've sold this vehicle, here's the VIN number, here's the money, now give me my title. And they send the title over to you as a dealer. It's a great way for auctions to sell more cars. It's a great way for dealers to have better inventory because, if you keep, 40 or 50 or 60 cars on your lot, that could be millions of dollars, $2 or $3 million of inventory. Most dealerships don't want to have that much cash or don't even have that much cash laying out on their inventory. So the auctions provide that financing, and they have outside sources of money that offer this line of credit. Now the car gets to the dealer's lot. It's sitting there on their lot. Now dealerships also have their own internal line of credit. It's called a floor plan. And it comes from the word showroom floor. Right? Your showroom floor has vehicles on it. And your floor plan line of credit is obtained by you as a dealer from a bank to fund your inventory. So sometimes when a dealer, again, we're not saying Carvana does this, but this is hypothetical, gets cars in, they notify their line of credit and say, look, we have these 20 cars. We want you to fund them to us. And the floor plan line of credit gives you the money. What you're supposed to do is use that money to actually pay for the vehicles. But what happens if you just notify the floor plan line of credit, hey, we bought these cars from an auction, give us the money, and then now they give you money. And you don't send it to the auction. Now the vehicles are financed twice. You have the vehicle, you didn't pay money, and you have several $100,000 of extra working capital. Now those cars get sold. Let's say you sell the car to Joe Schmo, retail buyer. Joe Schmo retail buyer gives you the money for that car. They give you $30,000 for that car, or if they finance it, their bank gives you $30,000. Now you have another funding for that vehicle. So that vehicle could be funded 3 times for you as a dealer. If you don't go and pay off that line of credit from the auction, you get to have the car for free and have it paid for twice. So you have this extra cash laying around. And if you float this money and float this inventory for a long time, you can actually fund your operations a lot more than just scraping up shoestring cash. You might say, well, does a public company need to do these kind of techniques? Don't they have a lot of extra cash? Well, Carvana's losing money. They have negative cash flow. They're burning through investor cash. They're selling a lot of cars, less so lately, but their cash reserves are being drained. So it's a little tempting for any dealership, again, we're not saying Carvana's doing this, to double dip their floor plan. It's called being out of trust, because the floor plan trusts you that you're paying for the car when you sell it. They trust you. So if you're out of trust, means that you're not doing it properly. So let's look at an example of how this works. We'll get back to Carvana in a moment. If you look at this news article from South Florida, Truist Bank shuts down access for this dealership. There's a dealership in Boca Raton, Florida called XL Auto Group. And allegedly, they did exactly that. They're accusing the owner of taking part in out-of-trust fraud. That's when a car dealership borrows money to buy cars, then sells those cars, but never repays the loan. This auto group are accused of mismanaging millions of dollars in cash and vehicles. So this high-end car dealership had Ferraris, Lamborghinis, high-end cars, and they would buy cars from auctions or consumers. They would get the money from their floor plan, then sell it, but not pay off the floor plan. So they were even selling cars with liens on vehicles. Buyers are not able to get titles. Does that sound familiar? This buyer is not able to obtain a title because there's a lien on the vehicle. This is in a lawsuit. Again, this is all alleged at this time. The auto group is saying they're $50 million in debt. So it's not like we're talking small change, small potatoes. This is a big deal. So this is how it happens. This isn't a recent story. This is, happening right now in 2022, April 2022. So how does that relate to Carvana? Again, we don't know that Carvana is doing this. We don't know that this is what their MO is. We don't know that they're doing anything wrong, for that matter. But if you think about it, a large public company that's a professional operation having so many title problems, people in multiple states, 15, 20 states sometimes you see in the news, not able to get a title for their car for months and months and months, sometimes no more than a year. There's only so many reasons that a licensed car dealership is not able to provide a title to the client, to the buyer. One of the reasons is they don't have it and they can't get it. Because if they did not pay off that floor plan or the line of credit from the auction, then they don't get a title and their buyer is out there twisting in the wind. Again, we don't know that's happening, but we're just trying to think of reasons why Carvana is not delivering titles to buyers. And it's not just isolated cases. There's multiple states, multiple attorneys general investigating this. If you could trace back some of these VIN numbers and titles, we can see maybe, why this is happening. Curious development that happened a few weeks ago actually. Carvana decided to buy one of the two major auto auctions, Odessa Auto Auction. Carvana did a leverage buyout of this auto auction. Now, how can they buy it if they have no money? Well, they got financing. Carvana convinced a hedge fund to lend them $2.8 billion to buy an auction. Well, if you're already struggling with your with your used car dealership, why would you be out looking to buy an auction? Well, again, if you buy an auction and it's crucial for you to have more flexibility with your financing from an auction. If you own the auction, then you have more flexibility with that financing. You see where this is going? Again, not saying they're doing anything wrong, but if you wanted to really have control over this title paperwork and this financing and not have the two separate sides of your business see each other, if you own the auction, you can do the paperwork differently. Hypothetical, of course. It's all conjecture at this point. But keep an eye on the news and keep an eye on the developments about Carvana to see if any of these hypotheticals turn out to be true. There may be a perfectly alternate explanation for all this. But when you have a large, publicly traded company in multiple states having title problems and money problems and auction problems at the same time, all of this kind of leads towards that hypothetical of, well, where are these titles? Who's financing these titles? Is it a floor plan? Is it an auction line of credit? The other kind of obscure part of this is Carvana is doing their own financing for their customers, meaning that they're not telling their customers, go to Wells Fargo, go to Chase Bank, go to Bank of America to get your loan. They're saying, we'll do the loan for you. And they have another bank, a third bank, that provides financing direct to the consumer, that Carvana controls that financing process. It's kind of like that old mortgage-backed security thing that happened with the real estate crash in 2008. It's internal financing. And so that funding comes in and that money goes directly to Carvana. Somebody buys a car, they pay $30,000, and the bank finances that vehicle. The money from the bank goes directly to the dealer. It doesn't go to the buyer. The money is wired directly to the dealer, to Carvana. So if you have control over all those three pieces of the puzzle, the auction financing, the floor plan, and the retail financing, anytime those overlap, meaning that in theory you're supposed to take the auction financing and pay it off as soon as you floor plan that car. And then when you retail it, you're supposed to pay that off as soon as you retail that vehicle. But anytime you can overlap that a little bit and maybe float the numbers, you have extra working capital to use. And that's where a lot of these smaller dealerships get into trouble. There's been new car dealerships that have had this too. You can do a Google search for out of trust dealership in the news, and there'll be many articles about dealerships doing this. You wouldn't expect it from a large public company, and it may not be true, but all of the factors that you hear about, the title, the money, cash flow, auctions, all relate to the same subject. So if you are an automotive purchaser, keep that in mind. If you are an investor, again, I've not looked at any of the official Carvana stock reporting documents that they have to file with the SEC. Don't know what's going on inside the company. If you're an employee of Carvana, if you have any knowledge of this or questions about it, we'd love to hear your comments. Put them below. Most important thing is that's known, the only thing that's known at this point is they're having title problems on a vast number of vehicles. That's not normal. It's not normal for a dealership to have that many title problems. Sure, if you're a new car dealership or used car dealership, you're going to have that 1 in 100, 1 in 500 vehicles that, something happened to the title. Got damaged, got lost, there's some weird scenario. But if you know what you're doing with titles, this should be an easy thing. Titles are not that hard. It's a piece of paper, you sign it, DMV, you're done. But there's reports of them issuing multiple temporary tags, paper plates from multiple states. And the fact that they have multiple locations in different states gives them some latitude to issue a temporary tag from one state. When it expires, issue one from another state because they have different licenses. Technically, they're not allowed to do that, but who's going to know the difference? If you issue one from, let's say, Arizona, and then another one from Chicago, and then another one from North Carolina, the different states aren't going to see that duplicate tag issuing. If you only have one dealership and you issue a second temporary tag, that's going to be a red flag. But if you have stores in different states, you can kind of wash that title, wash that delay among a couple different states, and maybe no one will be the wiser. It'll be interesting to see how this all plays out. If you've bought a car from Carvana and has title problems, we'd love to hear from you in the comments. If you're an employee of Carvana and you have any insight into this, we'd love to hear about it in the comments. The title crisis is not a minor thing. There are many states with active law enforcement investigations of this company. Maybe it all will turn out to be a misunderstanding. Maybe it'll all turn out to be just a inefficiency of paperwork. But when a government agency at the level of Attorney General or some other high-level law enforcement gets involved, usually it's because they've looked at it and said there's more to it than meets the eye. We'll be watching it. Hope you will be too. Love to hear your comments and see how this matches up to the final version of the story that may not be known for months or even years.